Most people believe their 40s are the decade where life finally becomes financially comfortable. The promotions are supposed to have happened. Income is supposed to be higher. Experience is supposed to make everything easier. But for millions of people, their 40s quietly become the decade where financial pressure reaches its absolute peak. Not because they suddenly became irresponsible, but because reality begins to speed up. Retirement no longer feels like a distant concept you can ignore. It starts to feel like a countdown you can hear ticking in the background. Children's expenses stop being small and predictable. School fees rise. University planning begins. Unexpected needs appear at the worst possible moments. At the same time, career certainty, something you once trusted, can start to feel fragile. Industries change. Younger talent enters the market. Technology moves faster than comfort. And then something even more subtle happens. Energy levels begin to shift. Not dramatically, not overnight, but just enough to make you realize that the pace you maintained in your 20s and 30s may not be sustainable forever. Financial mistakes that once felt recoverable now feel heavier, more permanent, more expensive. Your 40s are not just another decade, they are the financial turning point decade. If you enjoy simple, straight-to-the-point finance psychology breakdowns like this, make sure you subscribe now and drop a comment saying 40s strategy so I know you're serious about building real financial stability. If you make the right moves here, strategic, intentional, disciplined moves, your 50s and 60s can become a period of stability, control, and quiet financial confidence. But if this phase is handled casually, if decisions are postponed, if lifestyle expands faster than financial structure, you may spend the next 20 years trying to repair what could have been secured today. And this is where most people misunderstand the real challenge. They believe success in their 40s is about earning more money. But the deeper truth is this. Your 40s are about protecting momentum, because by this stage of life, wealth is rarely destroyed by one big mistake. It is slowly weakened by small, repeated patterns. Overspending that feels justified. Investments that are delayed. Savings goals that keep getting adjusted. Financial conversations that are avoided. These patterns don't look dangerous in the moment. But over time, they compound. And compounding works both ways. It can build freedom, or it can quietly build pressure. That is why the milestones you accomplish in this decade matter more than almost any other financial phase of your life. Not because time is running out, but because leverage is still available, if you act with intention. Now let's begin. In your 20s, time feels like an invisible safety net. In your 30s, it still feels flexible. But in your 40s, something changes, not suddenly, but clearly enough that you can no longer ignore it. The illusion of unlimited time begins to disappear. You start realizing that financial decisions are no longer just about later. They are about consequences that may arrive sooner than expected. This is the decade where planning stops being theoretical and starts becoming emotional. Because now, timelines feel real. Retirement is no longer a distant number on a calculator. It becomes a date you can almost visualize. And this shift alone creates a new kind of pressure. But here is where many people make a dangerous assumption. They believe higher income will automatically solve this pressure. After all, by your 40s, you are likely earning more than you did before. You may have reached senior roles, built experience, gained credibility. From the outside, everything looks stable. Yet internally, financial anxiety can quietly grow, because income alone is no longer enough. In fact, for many people, income growth becomes matched, or even surpassed, by lifestyle growth. Bigger homes, better schools, more responsibilities, higher expectations, and suddenly, the financial margin that once existed starts to shrink. This is when the pressure triangle begins to form. On one side, aging parents may begin to need support. Medical expenses, caregiving responsibilities, emotional obligations. On another side, children's needs expand. Education planning, skill development, future security. And then, standing directly in front of you, the retirement countdown. Three forces pulling from three different directions. This triangle creates a psychological weight that most people do not openly discuss. Because admitting financial pressure in your 40s can feel like admitting failure. You tell yourself, I should have figured this out by now. So instead of confronting the situation directly, many people do something subtle but costly. They delay clarity. They avoid calculating their real net worth. They postpone reviewing investments. They ignore debt structures. They continue spending based on past confidence rather than present reality. This is financial denial, not reckless denial, but polite denial. The kind that shows up as optimism without strategy, hope without structure, movement without direction. And this decade has a unique way of exposing that. Because by your 40s, patterns have had enough time to compound. There is a financial truth that becomes impossible to ignore in your 40s. Debt that once felt manageable now starts to feel heavy. Not because the numbers suddenly changed, but because your relationship with risk begins to change. In your 20s, debt often feels like a tool. In your 30s, it feels like a phase. But in your 40s, debt can quietly become a threat. This is why eliminating high-interest debt completely becomes one of the most powerful milestones you can achieve in this decade. Because time is no longer as forgiving. If a financial setback happens now, a job disruption, health challenge, business slowdown, recovery windows are shorter, responsibilities are larger, options are fewer, and high-interest debt amplifies every one of those risks. What many people underestimate is not just the financial cost of debt, but the psychological cost. There is a hidden stress tax that comes with carrying loans at this stage of life. It shows up in subtle ways. You hesitate before making long-term investments. You delay opportunities that require courage. You feel less confident negotiating career moves. You tolerate situations you might otherwise outgrow. Because somewhere in the background, debt is dictating your level of freedom. This is the part most people never openly admit. Debt reduces financial flexibility. And flexibility is one of the most valuable assets you can possess in your 40s. Flexibility allows you to change industries if necessary. Support family members without panic. Take calculated risks. Recover from unexpected events without collapsing your entire financial structure. But when high-interest obligations exist, every decision becomes heavier. Every month begins with payments that do not build your future. They simply maintain your past. And over time, this creates compounding damage that many people fail to recognize early enough. Interest compounds. Stress compounds. Delay compounds. Years pass faster than expected. A loan that was supposed to last 3 years quietly stretches into 7. A balance that looked small becomes emotionally exhausting. Not because you are irresponsible, but because life became complex. This is why your 40s demand a new standard of financial discipline, not perfection, but decisiveness. Eliminating high-interest debt is not just about improving cash flow. It is about reclaiming psychological control. It marks an identity shift. You move from being a borrower, someone reacting to financial obligations, to becoming a stabilizer, someone who creates financial certainty for themselves and others. And this shift changes how you think. You begin prioritizing resilience over appearances, structure over impulse, freedom over temporary comfort. Because once high-interest debt is gone, something powerful happens. Your income starts working for your future again. Your stress levels begin to drop. Your choices begin to expand. Your confidence begins to return. And most importantly, you stop negotiating with urgency. You start planning with intention. That is the real milestone. Not just paying off a balance, but building a financial life where pressure no longer controls your decisions. And that foundation prepares you for the next critical move, both good ones and dangerous ones. If your financial habits are disciplined, this decade accelerates stability. If your habits are reactive, this decade accelerates stress. This is why awareness becomes your most powerful milestone. Not fear, but honest awareness. Because the moment you stop pretending time is unlimited, you begin using it like the valuable asset it has always been. And that realization changes everything that comes next. There is a moment many people experience in their 40s that they never fully prepared for. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is just a quiet realization. Life is no longer predictable enough for small financial cushions. In earlier decades, the idea of saving 3 months of expenses sounded responsible, smart, disciplined, and for a long time, it was enough. But your 40s introduce a new level of complexity that most people underestimate. Career risk begins to change shape. You may be earning more than ever before, holding leadership positions, managing teams, carrying influence. Yet paradoxically, job security can feel less certain. Industries restructure. Organizations downsize. Skills that once made you indispensable can suddenly feel outdated. And finding a new opportunity at this stage often takes longer than expected. Not because you are less capable, but because the stakes are higher for both you and the employer. At the same time, health becomes less predictable. Not necessarily severe problems, but enough surprises to disrupt financial rhythm. Medical tests, unexpected procedures, periods where productivity drops. And then there are family obligations, aging parents who may need financial assistance, children whose educational paths become more expensive, extended family situations that require stepping in, sometimes without warning. This is why a small emergency fund no longer creates real security. It creates temporary comfort, the kind that disappears the moment a serious challenge appears. What you need in your 40s is what many financial psychologists call a sleep peacefully fund. Not just money set aside, but enough reserves to protect your mental stability. Because financial stress at this stage is not only about survival, it affects decision-making. When reserves are low, fear becomes louder. Short-term thinking increases. Risk tolerance becomes distorted. You may accept roles that drain you, delay strategic moves, avoid investments that could build long-term strength. But when your emergency fund is substantial, something powerful shifts. Your nervous system relaxes. You begin operating from intention instead of urgency. You negotiate better. You plan longer. You think clearer. This is the real purpose of a serious emergency fund. It does not just protect your bank account. It protects your ability to make rational, future-focused decisions. And here is the deeper truth most people discover late. In your 20s and 30s, growth feels like the ultimate priority. More income, more assets, more visible progress. But in your 40s, stability quietly becomes more valuable than aggressive growth. Because growth without protection can collapse overnight. Whereas stability creates a platform from which sustainable growth can finally happen. This milestone is not about fear. It is about maturity. It is about recognizing that resilience is now your greatest financial advantage. Because once you build a fund that allows you to sleep peacefully, you stop reacting to life's uncertainties. You start directing your future with calm confidence. And that emotional stability becomes a powerful financial edge. There is a financial window that opens in your 40s that many people fail to recognize while it is happening. It is the peak earning window, not guaranteed, not automatic, but highly possible, if approached with intention. By this stage of life, you have accumulated something incredibly valuable: experience, reputation, perspective, networks that took decades to build. These are not just career advantages, they are income multipliers. This is why your 40s should ideally become your highest income decade. Not because you need to work endlessly, but because this is when smart positioning can produce disproportionate rewards. Yet many people misunderstand how to activate this phase. They assume hard work alone will carry them forward. They stay loyal to routines that once produced growth, double down on effort instead of upgrading strategy. And slowly, income growth begins to slow down. This is where the distinction between skill monetization and job dependence becomes critical. A job pays you for presence. Monetized skills pay you for value. When your income depends entirely on a single employer's structure, your financial trajectory becomes externally controlled. Promotions may come. Raises may happen. But the pace is rarely fully in your hands. However, when you begin monetizing specialized skills, consulting, advisory roles, project-based leadership, teaching expertise, building scalable offers, you create income pathways that are not limited by traditional ceilings. This does not mean abandoning your career. It means expanding your leverage. Some achieve this through strategic promotions that place them closer to decision-making and profit influence. Others build small businesses connected to their professional strengths. Some develop second income streams that begin quietly but grow powerfully over time. The key is intentional positioning, because the biggest mistake people make in their 40s is becoming comfortable too early. They reach a stable salary, a predictable routine, a lifestyle that feels good enough, and then they stop stretching. They stop negotiating, stop learning aggressively, stop exploring higher value opportunities. Comfort begins to replace ambition. At first, nothing seems wrong. Bills are paid, vacations happen, life appears balanced, but beneath the surface, income plateaus begin to form. And plateaus are dangerous. Not because income stops completely, but because expenses rarely plateau with the same discipline. Inflation continues. Family needs expand. Future goals become more expensive. Without intentional income acceleration, financial pressure slowly returns, even at higher salary levels. This is how many people become financially trapped despite earning more than they ever imagined in their youth. The solution is not burnout. It is strategic intensity. Choosing the right opportunities. Building influence where it matters. Turning accumulated experience into scalable financial outcomes. Your 40s reward clarity more than raw effort. They reward positioning more than persistence alone. If you treat this decade as your income peak strategy phase, you give your future self something priceless. Momentum that compounds. Because when income expands intentionally while stability structures are already in place, wealth stops being theoretical. It starts becoming inevitable. There is a quiet clock that becomes louder in your 40s. You may not hear it every day. You may even ignore it during busy seasons of life. But eventually, it demands your attention. Retirement planning stops feeling like a distant responsibility. It becomes an urgent reality. Not because retirement is tomorrow, but because the runway is now clearly visible. In earlier decades, delays felt harmless. You told yourself you would start investing properly once income increased, once debts reduced, once life became more stable. Now income has likely improved. Responsibilities are clearer, and stability, at least externally, appears stronger. This is why your 40s represent the decisive decade for retirement acceleration. Because the financial decisions you make now will determine whether your 60s feel secure or stressful. Many people underestimate the power of late-stage compounding. They assume that if they did not invest aggressively in their 20s or 30s, the opportunity is already lost. This belief is not entirely accurate. While early investing has undeniable advantages, disciplined and substantial investing in your 40s can still create powerful outcomes, especially when contributions become larger and more consistent. At this stage, your greatest advantage is not time alone. It is capacity. Higher income allows for bigger allocations. Clearer priorities allow for stronger commitment. Life experience allows for more rational decision-making. But this also introduces a psychological challenge known as catch-up investing. The moment you calculate how much you should have invested by now, a wave of regret can appear. You compare yourself to peers. You imagine lost growth. You feel pressure to make up for time quickly. And this is where many people make dangerous moves. They chase high-risk opportunities, speculate emotionally, swing between overinvesting and freezing completely, because panic rarely produces disciplined wealth. This is why retirement anxiety often peaks in the late 40s. Not because people suddenly become irresponsible, but because reality becomes undeniable. The gap between current savings and future needs becomes visible. And visibility creates urgency. The solution is not fear-driven action. It is structured acceleration. Turning investments from optional behavior into mandatory behavior. Not something you do when convenient, but something you prioritize with the same seriousness as housing, food, or education expenses. Automated contributions. Clear allocation strategies. Regular portfolio reviews. These are not exciting habits, but they are powerful ones. Because when investing becomes non-negotiable, compounding regains its momentum. Each year begins to matter more. Each contribution builds psychological confidence. Each market cycle becomes an opportunity instead of a threat. Aggressive retirement acceleration is not about gambling your future. It is about reclaiming control over it. Recognizing that while you cannot change the past, you can still influence the trajectory ahead. And once investing becomes a disciplined routine rather than a hopeful intention, your financial future stops feeling uncertain. It starts feeling constructed. That shift alone can transform how you approach the next milestone. There is a subtle financial danger that becomes stronger in your 40s. It does not look like a crisis. It does not feel irresponsible. In fact, it often feels justified. It is the mindset of, I deserve this. After decades of effort, sacrifice, and delayed gratification, spending begins to feel like a reward you have finally earned. A better house, a more impressive car, frequent upgrades that signal progress. And on the surface, none of this seems wrong, because your income is higher, your career is more established, your lifestyle can now match the image you once imagined. But this is where lifestyle inflation quietly begins to reshape your financial future. Not through one reckless decision, but through small expansions that become permanent obligations. Monthly costs increase, expectations rise, flexibility shrinks. What makes this phase even more dangerous is social comparison. In your 40s, your peer group is often at similar career stages. You see colleagues buying properties, traveling more, displaying visible success. And without realizing it, you begin measuring progress externally. You upgrade not because you truly need to, but because standing still feels like falling behind. This comparison trap rarely announces itself. It shows up as subtle pressure. Pressure to maintain appearances. Pressure to signal achievement. Pressure to prove that your hard work has produced visible results. The real financial game of your 40s is not about chasing wealth. It is about protecting the wealth you are finally building. Because growth without protection can be fragile. Unexpected events can erase years of progress if risk management is ignored. This is why insurance, diversification, and risk awareness become non-negotiable at this stage. Adequate health coverage, income protection, balanced investment exposure, emergency liquidity. These structures may not feel exciting. They do not provide social validation. But they create resilience, the ability to withstand shocks without financial collapse. And resilience is what separates temporary success from lasting security. Financial maturity begins to replace financial display. You start asking different questions. Not, can I afford this? But, what does this cost me long term? Not, will people be impressed? But, will this strengthen or weaken my future stability? This shift requires emotional discipline, because visible success is immediately rewarding. Quiet wealth protection is not. It often feels invisible, uncelebrated, even boring. But over time, it produces something powerful. Freedom from constant pressure. When lifestyle inflation is controlled, surplus capital can flow into investments, debt reduction, and safety structures. When risks are diversified, setbacks become manageable instead of devastating. When spending becomes intentional rather than reactive, financial confidence begins to stabilize. Your 40s are the decade where the focus must move from proving success to preserving it. Because true wealth is not what you display. It is what you can sustain. And those who master this milestone often enter their 50s with something many others lack. Calm financial strength that no longer depends on constant earning or constant approval. There is a powerful realization that often arrives in your 40s. You may not want to retire early. You may still enjoy working, building, contributing. But you begin to desire something deeper than income. You begin to desire the option to walk away. Not out of frustration, not out of burnout, but out of choice. This is what creating financial independence direction truly means. It is not about escaping responsibility. It is about designing a life where work becomes intentional rather than compulsory. For many people, this realization feels both exciting and uncomfortable, because it requires a shift in thinking. Instead of asking, how long must I keep working? You start asking, what would make work optional? And this question changes your financial priorities. Income alone is no longer the goal. Ownership becomes the focus. Assets that generate income without daily presence begin to matter more than salary increases. This is where passive income foundations enter the conversation, not the unrealistic fantasies often promoted online, but practical structures that gradually reduce financial dependence on active effort. Rental income from carefully chosen properties, dividend-producing investments, royalties from intellectual work, equity in businesses that continue operating even when you are not directly involved. These streams rarely appear overnight. They are built deliberately, contribution by contribution, decision by decision. And the earlier you begin shaping them, the stronger they become. For some, this milestone involves stepping into business ownership, not necessarily launching something massive, but acquiring or building ventures connected to existing expertise, consulting firms, service agencies, digital products, partnership investments. Ownership creates leverage. Leverage creates optionality. And optionality creates psychological freedom long before full financial independence is reached. For others, the path may focus more on asset accumulation, strategic investing, portfolio diversification, long-term compounding structures. The specific path matters less than the direction, because without intentional direction, financial independence remains a vague hope, something imagined for the future, on something postponed until one day. But your 40s are the decade where hope must become design. You begin mapping how much income would make you feel secure. How many years of disciplined asset building are required? What risks must be reduced? What opportunities must be pursued? This is not a phase of random ambition. It is a phase of structured vision. You are no longer reacting to life's financial demands. You are engineering your escape routes, routes that allow you to change careers without panic, take sabbaticals without fear, support family without destabilizing your own future. Financial independence direction does not guarantee immediate freedom, but it guarantees momentum toward it. And momentum, once established, becomes one of the most powerful forces in personal finance. Because when you stop hoping for freedom and start constructing it, every decision begins aligning with a life you actually control. There is a truth about money in your 40s that most people only understand after experiencing unnecessary stress. This decade is not primarily about becoming rich. It is about becoming financially unshakable. In earlier stages of life, wealth is often associated with speed, fast growth, fast wins, fast visible success. You measure progress by how quickly income increases, how dramatically lifestyle improves, how impressive financial milestones appear to others. But your 40s introduce a different definition of success. One that is quieter, yet far more powerful. Because by this stage, life has already shown you something important. Uncertainty is real. Markets change. Careers shift. Health can surprise you. All family responsibilities evolve. And in the middle of all this movement, what you begin to value most is not just expansion, it is stability. Real wealth in your 40s does not always look glamorous. It looks like reduced anxiety, the ability to sleep without constantly calculating how long your savings will last, the confidence that unexpected expenses will not destabilize your entire financial structure. It looks like predictable income. Not necessarily the highest income you have ever earned, but income streams that are consistent, reliable, and diversified enough to support your life without constant fear. It looks like controlled expenses, not restriction driven by scarcity, but intentional spending guided by clarity, knowing where your money goes, knowing which costs truly improve your quality of life, and knowing which ones quietly erode your future. It also looks like future clarity, a realistic understanding of what retirement may require, what financial independence might look like, how many years of disciplined action are still needed. Clarity replaces guesswork. Strategy replaces emotional decision-making. And slowly, something profound begins to happen. Money stops feeling like a source of pressure. It starts feeling like a system you understand. This is the psychological shift that defines financial maturity. Because becoming financially unshakable does not mean eliminating all risks. It means building structures strong enough to absorb them. Emergency reserves, protected income streams, disciplined investing habits, lifestyle choices that prioritize sustainability over appearance. These are not dramatic moves, they are life-changing ones. And this leads to a powerful realization many people reach too late. Your 40s are not the decade to experiment recklessly with money. They are the decade to secure your life, to strengthen foundations, to correct past delays, to position yourself for decades where earning energy may naturally decline. When this decade is handled with intention, your 50s can feel calmer, your 60s can feel prepared, your later years can feel dignified rather than uncertain. If this video helped you rethink how to approach money in your 40s, subscribe for more clear, psychology-driven finance breakdowns. And comment, "Stability first," if you are committed to building financial peace, not just chasing income.